All right. So I'd like to call this meeting of the East Franklinton Review Board to order. Stephanie, call the roll, please.
Mr. Farkas,
Here.
Mr. White,
Here.
Mr. Nobby,
Here.
Ms. Benner, here, Mr. Sweeney,
Here.
Ms. Hamilton, here. We have a quorum.
Okay. Staff, identify yourselves and swear you in.
Stephanie Hensler, Labor Planning Division.
Okay. And do you swear or affirm that the statements that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on. New applications. So first application is EF 2211-001, address 540 West Broad Street. And Mike Frush, hope I didn't get that wrong, Columbus Historical Society is the owner. David Votero, Schooley Caldwell Associates is the applicant. Staff report.
We do have a public forum item. We have Christopher Lohr to give an update on the zoning code.
Okay, you want to take that first?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on the ball here. Let's do two things.
That's not on that agenda. This is a new one, I guess.
All right. Yep, okay. Well, first of all, since it's not on this agenda, but we got to do it, has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from the previous meeting?
Yes.
Unless there are any additions or corrections, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay, Stephanie, call the roll, please.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. White,
Abstain.
Mr. Nobby,
Approve.
Ms. Benner, approve, Mr. Sweeney,
Abstain. I was not here, correct?
and Ms. Hamilton, approved. Motion carries.
Okay, so before we get going with the new applications, then I note that we have an update on the zoning code from Alex Sauersmith.
Alex is out today, so I'll be taking care of that role.
That's not right. Don't mistake. Next one.
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Christopher Lohr. I'm a planning manager with the City of Columbus Planning Division. I'm giving an update on the first phases of this zoning code update known as Zone In. And some of this will be covering a lot of things that you already know, but for the record, and for people that may be watching at home, I'm going to cover even some of the basics. So, what is a zoning code? Zoning codes are a set of rules that regulate what can and cannot be done on a particular piece of property, and they influence where we live, where we work, and how we get around. Zoning can help create the conditions for smart, sustainable, equitable growth and unlock economic and development potential for our neighborhoods. It can provide residents a clearer idea of what can be built in their neighborhoods and also help developers avoid unnecessary time and cost when they decide to invest. However, zoning codes cannot mandate development. It will take time for investment and new construction to happen. Previously, the city engaged a consultant to do a zoning code assessment to learn about our existing code. Here's what we learned. We know that it hasn't been updated since the 1950s comprehensively. Prior to that, it's essentially the same as it was when it was first adopted in the 1920s. In 2020 and 2021, Columbus conducted a comprehensive assessment. Those key findings showed that the standards within the zoning code are not tailored to local conditions. The code does not prioritize future housing and transit needs equitably. It is not user-friendly. There's an over-reliance on site-by-site negotiated zoning actions. And there's a multi-layered and scattered decision-making process that creates uncertainty for neighborhoods as well as for developers. We did a community priority survey. As part of that, we learned from about 3,000 responses that the top 10 priorities, or the top 3 priorities for communities were fostering walkable neighborhoods, encouraging conservation of natural resources, and supporting improved transit. We did find that the top priorities varied among different demographic groups. For renters, for example, affordable housing was number one. For African Americans, promoting equity was number one. For under 35, improved transit was the top. So we were able to slice and dice the data to understand what the different priorities are for people. That survey, though, was limited. We didn't hear from a representative sample, and that further emphasizes the need as part of this phase for robust community engagement so that we ensure that we're hearing from people that we don't normally hear from. For example, 77% of the respondents in that survey were homeowners, whereas less than half of Columbus residents are. So where we're going, we're starting with a focus on Columbus's key corridors, areas like West Broad Street, East Main Street, High Street, Morse, Sawmill 161, centers like the Continent that might be a little bit tired. These places serve as the main streets of their community and are places where transit, housing options, employment centers, and connected amenities can be focused. By starting here, we can build more housing to help fight rising housing costs, and we can create jobs closer to where people live. Things that we will consider for these corridors are mixed-use development opportunities, a variety of housing policies, changes to parking policies, land use policies, as well as development, building standards, and guidelines. No decision currently has been made about how the code will change, but the goal is to be responsive to emerging city policies and priorities, as well as current and projected population trends and needs. In addition to extensive community engagement, we are also in the process of forming an advisory committee that's made up of community leaders and industry professionals who will help guide this update process. We will continue to be discussing, drafting, and refining the code for the first phase of mixed-use districts and transit corridors well into 2023, with the hope to have a final draft reviewed and adopted in spring 2024. In the summer of 2024, we would be looking at going beyond the key transit corridors into the business centers and our residential neighborhoods. So throughout this process, we have been going out to different commissions, boards, neighborhood groups, and asking the community, and we will continue to ask community for input on various components and strategies to help shape this tool for our community. We'll be hosting many opportunities. You may have attended some of these. Undesign the Red Line was here. We're working in partnership with the YWCA for that exhibit, which will also be going around to multiple locations throughout the city. So we encourage you and your friends and neighbors to zone in on this effort and share your perspectives. The more people we hear from, the better. So if you'd like to stay updated with this process, you have on your handout information about how to do that. And we will continue to pop into the review board with additional updates as they come. So I can answer any questions. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Kim, did you have a question?
So can you give us some kind of a idea of how this update might affect East Franklinton?
So that's a great question. Primarily, the code that we're looking at updating is the base code that would be found outside of East Franklinton. So any changes to East Franklinton will obviously be working hand in hand with you all on what that looks like. But primarily, it's beyond our downtown East Franklinton, which are their own zoning districts.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? If not, thanks for the update.
All right, thank you.
All right. Now, we will move to new applications. Application number EF 22-11-001, 540 West Broad Street. Mike Crush, the Columbus Historical Society is the owner, and David Quintero, Schooley Caldwell Associates is the applicant. Staff report, please.
Thank you. Application EF 22-11-001. The applicant is requesting review and approval for phase 1 of a renovation project for Engine House 6 within the West Broad Street subdistrict. The proposal includes change of use to a museum and auxiliary uses. And then exterior alterations to the building, which would include complete re-roofing with slate line asphalt shingles in place of deteriorated slate and TPO membrane roof on low slope areas per the submitted drawings. Cleaning and repairing the exterior masonry per the submitted drawings. Original windows will be stripped, restored, and refinished. Existing door frames will be restored with new custom wood doors being built to match historic photos and artifact evidence. New period appropriate security lighting. New narrow uplight below the loopers. New facade lighting at transom recesses. Repair and replace existing gutters and downspouts as needed. Replace cornice trim as needed with in-kind PVC trim to be painted in prime. Restore original window and door openings per submitted drawings. Repair, restore existing wood trim as needed. Paint all exterior wooden surfaces, the finished color TBD. New fiber cement siding at the dormer with new PVC trim to match the original configuration and profile. Remove existing electrical, mechanical, steel channel, non-historic trim and casing, skylight, and miscellaneous hardware on the exterior per the submitted drawings. The applicant will also be doing some landscaping and site work, which includes remove existing stone wall and provide appropriate fill to repair the grade. Remove existing broken asphalt and concrete paving. Salvage all existing paving block, reinstalling per submitted site plan. New concrete walks, landing steps, ADA ramp, and stoop for the submitted site plan. Patch existing stone coping with restoration mortar, secure existing steel hatchway doors, patch existing concrete stair and sidewalk to basement and areaway, a new 6-foot-high wood board-on-board fence with gate as detailed on the site plans, relocating the existing 6-foot-high wood fence per the plan. The applicant has included a site plan, floor plans, elevations, existing condition photos, and material cut sheets. For the staff analysis section, the proposed use is consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends that historic and contributing buildings be preserved to the extent possible. The proposal is consistent with this recommendation. The applicant is generally employing historic preservation best practices in the restoration of the building. Staff notes that Engine House 6 is on the National Register of Historic Places, but is not registered locally. Plan also recommends screening between residential and non-residential uses. The proposal is somewhat consistent with this recommendation, as there is screening proposed between the project and the residential to the east, but not to the north. Further, the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan states that service and loading zones should be located to the rear, side, or an internal location and screened to full height, in addition to any roof and/or ground-mounted mechanical. The proposal is somewhat consistent with these guidelines. Plan also recommends that lighting should be fully shielded and directed downward. The proposal is inconsistent with the standard. And finally, the plan recommends that street trees be on all public and private streets. As such, staff recommends the applicant provide appropriate screening along the north property line, as well as around the service and loading zone and any ground or roof mounted mechanical. And the applicant should provide compliant light fixtures and work with the city forester on street trees as appropriate. If approved, the board would be approving the following code development standard modifications: to allow light fixtures that are not fully shielded and or directed downward, and to legitimize the existing front yard setback of 11 feet, which is a 1-foot increase over the code specified 10-foot maximum. Staff is recommending conditional approval, with those conditions being the applicant work with the city forester to incorporate street trees along West Broad Street and North Mill Street, provide fully shielded light fixtures that are directed downward, and provide screening in accordance with plan guidelines along the north property line, as well as the loading service zone areas and around any mechanical.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? If not, will the applicant please step forward? Gentlemen, please state your names for the record.
Sure. Michael Fresh, President of the Columbus Historical Society Board of Trustees.
And I'm Sam Rosenthal, a principal with Schooling Caldwell, here on behalf of my colleague Dave Otero, who is in our team.
And for both of you, do you swear or affirm that the statements you're about to give, testimony you're about to give, is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Thank you. Floor is yours.
The The staff recommendation really covers most of what we feel is appropriate for this building. We're really just trying to preserve it and keep water from coming into the failed roofs and repoint the brick and clean it up as necessary. The one area regarding the street trees that I just want to push back a little bit on is that historically, there was always a free entry and exit here because we had horses pulling buggies and we had engines that were coming out. So this building was one that was always meant to be fully viewed along Broad Street. I think it certainly is appropriate for street trees maybe along the west side, but along Broad Street, we feel pretty strongly that this is a facade that never would have been covered up, and therefore it is our recommendation that the forestry approach not be used on Broad Street. And then regarding the light fixtures, we're proposing the one with we'll call it the wavy profile, which we think is a very period appropriate look. We also feel that there's a strong precedent just down the street at Gravity with high visibility lights that are not shielded in any way. So having this relatively modest light that has a little bit of spillover, we feel will just help to brighten up this building in context. Apart from that, all the other recommendations we fully understand and agree with. And again, this is just phase one of the project. There are plans for additional development in the future, so we fully anticipate seeing you again.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
I'll take a shot. So could you just go over the lights one by one again and talk about if we could pull those up? And just so we're clear what staff's recommending versus what you're proposing.
So in the lower right-hand corner there, you can see the sort of the wavy profile of the light. And you can see that it's not a full cutoff fixture because the bottom of that bulb is exposed. Historically, a lot of the lanterns, you think about things like gas lanterns and things like that would have a visible light source. And that's why we believe this is a period appropriate appearance here. That it's shielded from going up and it's just not a full cutoff. Usually the shielding is something that's just about light trespassing, so say your neighbor's bedroom windows, things like that. We're really proposing this more as kind of facade lighting and being pretty modest about it, not trying to do any daylighting on this building, just enhance the architecture a little bit.
And how about the other two fixtures? How are they being?
A little bit of accent lighting on the facade, but just because of that, there's not full cutoff.
So where will the uplights be used? On the top right?
So there's, okay, you can see in the elevation that's up right now, it's the wavy fixture. The one that's shown in the I guess the larger photo right now on the bottom of the screen. Forgive me, I'm jumping in on this one.
Okay.
So the uplights are lighting the louvers and tower just below the louvers.
Right there.
Yeah.
So the coded note number 2 on the elevation 2 for the west. So they're directed right back at the building. Oh, we might have a slightly newer version of the plan than you all. So yeah, those 3 stripes that you're seeing right now where the cursor is, that's what they're intended to light up, just as an accent.
So what are they attached to?
They'll be attached to the masonry joints. I have this document that shows specifically where they're intended to be mounted, if that's all right. So right below the band.
so they actually show up on here. Those wouldn't be traditional.
They would not.
And so the traditional wavy light fixture, I mean, we don't call out bulb, right? So, I mean, back when we were dealing with lanterns, then there was a certain amount of control of how much light was coming from that. And now I'm looking at bright LED bulbs, which are, I think that's the whole reason for the shielding and having things pointed downwards. So while I like your thought along the lines of a historic looking fixture, I think it still, proves to be problematic because of the bulbs that we're using now.
Even in context with the down the street example.
Unfortunately, I wasn't here during that time. I probably would have had an opinion about that too.
What down the street example are we referring to here?
The lighting on Gravity.
That's, so you're talking about uplighting on Gravity?
I'm talking about the sort of fully exposed huge neon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Subtle stuff. Okay.
We feel like we're taking a pretty relaxed approach with the lighting here, and understandable about the exposed fixture, what you see. The LEDs certainly are kind of, they come in different brightnesses. We're not trying to do any daylighting or anything like that. And color temperature, of course, in the 2700 Kelvin range to be a warm white that would be appropriate for the period.
Yeah, again, I like the idea of the period lighting. And again, the shielding is, again, that's a different subject. So the fixture, cool. I think how that lighting is that shielded is the question that we're talking about, right? And the other two fixtures, I don't think are period lighting. I kind of have a problem with that. Is there another way to accomplish the same uplighting or washing or with doing something that might be more complementary to the historic building?
We could certainly explore doing a grace picture that wouldn't be kind of visible to view. Still, that would allow us to get the same effect and maybe uplight in that louvered area. For the purposes of this hearing, to allow us to proceed with the rest of the work, if that's something that we could omit and come back with at a later date, perhaps. Our primary goal is really about making sure that the roof work, the masonry work, the doors and windows can proceed.
So
Alright.
sorry,
Go ahead.
just
Go
to
ahead.
clarify for the process, if we pulled lighting and basically made a condition that they would come back for final lighting approval, that does still prevent them from moving forward because they wouldn't be able to get their COA for this project without satisfying the condition of getting lighting approval. So just keep that in mind.
But we can approve it without particular lights, and they can come back and ask for those later.
You mean like just approve it, assuming they were not proposing any exterior lighting whatsoever?
No, I'm saying that if we could approve the ones that are appropriate with shielding, appropriate shielding, that would be a one step, right? In the right direction. I don't know about the LED strip lighting. I don't know how, that's probably pretty innocuous, right? It just kind of blends in.
It ends up being, we installed them at Levesque, and it sits in a little tray, essentially.
You don't
You
really
don't see the fixture.
It's the ones on the top that bother me. It looks like landscape lighting applied to a building.
That's fair.
I
So
mean, if there is a more appropriate light that you all be comfortable approving today, you can make that a condition, but they're gonna need full approval of their lighting before they can move forward.
All right, well, discussion. Let's start with staff recommended conditions. So applicant to work with city forester, to incorporate street trees along West Broad Street and North Mill Street. The applicant would like to avoid doing this along West Broad Street. Anybody have an issue with that?
I do.
Okay, fire.
So, that Broad Street is one of the corridors that's being looked at for rapid transit. There's going to be a whole streetscape, new streetscape for Broad Street that wants to be consistent. And I would hope that this project would fit into that. So I don't know what that means in terms of the future, but at least starting to develop that. I mean, I think Broad Street needs all the help it can get to scale it down to make it feel more human, and street trees are going to do that. So I take your point that historically they may not have been there, but you've changed the function of the building. So I think street trees would be, perfectly fine there. So I would.
I would agree. Yeah. For consistency's sake, and like you said, the fast pace of East Broad Street, indeed.
And at the end of the day, it's really kind of up to the city forester's discretion. So typically, if we put a condition on an application, it's that you reach out to the city forester, and they may come back and say, no, street trees don't work here for whatever reason, vision clearance, plethora of reasons. So,
And that's fine if it's, basically I support the staff recommendation to work with city.
Yeah.
Which, and again, there's a technical aspect.
All right. That being said, we probably ought to move on from that issue then. All right. Fully shielded light fixtures directed downward. Kim, you kind of covered that territory. So what we're looking at here is what? We're going to require the applicant to come back with appropriate lighting.
I mean, I don't have another recommendation to as opposed to that one myself. So unless you have one in your hip pocket that.
I think just from procedure standpoint, a conditional approval that they come back for full approval of lighting and amongst potentially other conditions, or just continuing it. About equivalent to the same thing, if we motion to continue it to next month, then they could go back and look for alternative fixtures to come back and present. Because they can't move forward with conditional approval to get their COA unless those conditions are stepped. So they would have to come back anyway.
But if they struck that light from the submission, just said we're not going to put that light on at all, can we prove it without that light? And the other two lights are with the shielding?
Maybe.
I'm trying to help.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, yes, I suppose if those lights did not exist, yeah, but you're removing them from the proposal, then.
So those, I mean, those lights are right on the front turret, right there, visible from the street. I think they're going to look funny, right? Look out of place.
And for me, it's just more light pollution and unnecessary for, it's a beautiful building. I'm not sure we need to have so many uplands.
So would it be acceptable, excuse me, I have a hard time talking today. Would it be acceptable for the applicant if we were to approve without the uplighting? And if for some reason you wanted to come back and add that later on, Stephanie, I presume it would be a separate application.
Yes.
It's a separate application to do that.
Specific to the uplights, no objection to that at all.
Okay, all right.
Just to clarify, is that the little spotlights or the rope lights, both?
Kim?
I think it's, well,
Go
Francis,
ahead, Kim.
I think the strip lights, I can see kind of just being installed the way that they blend in with the architecture, and I don't really have a problem with that, other than the comment about light pollution.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, if the other, what you call the historic lights, if they can shield that, I'm fine with that. It's just those lights that are up on the tower.
Well, I'm interested in Francis. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about the light pollution, or like your concern with that kind of being in the space that we're in. It's, little, can you expand off that just so I can understand it?
So in these instances, when we are seeing things projects like Gravity, which emit a lot of light into our everyday life. I feel like it's becoming overwhelming. And when we are seeing that precedent being set over and over again for unnecessary, not historically appropriate lighting, then, and what's the point? Do you see what I'm saying? So I feel like, putting more light into, places like, the Southwest have very strict rules. They don't even let you have a yellow, McDonald's sign out there. Everything has to be blue. So, down to the types of bulbs that we are using and the way that we are lighting up our landscape, I think is really important right now, especially in the day and age of where we're going completely away from eye-friendly, incandescent lighting to LED lights that are frankly blinding in a lot of instances. So I just,
It's helpful.
yeah, I just
I don't
wanna-
know if I necessarily in that.
I like
Yeah.
really appropriate lighting. I like good lighting, but I'm not sure we're going in that direction anymore. And like I said, I love the fixture that you picked out, but you screw a really bright LED bulb in there, then it's awful. It's, it just kind of clutters things
It's not a
up.
gaslight anymore, right?
Right. Yeah,
Which is what it would have been.
yes.
It's real.
I'd like to add also, it'd be unfortunate if going forward, we sort of said that the gravity bulbs are the standard, that sort of erases any sort of controls on the lighting, which should question. But just going forward, I'll be sensitive to that.
Yeah, I mean,
That is what it is. It doesn't mean that nothing else should be considered.
yeah, I think it's about the shielding. The argument about light pollution gets into technical issues about, how bright it, I don't, that's beyond I don't understand all that, but properly shield them so that you don't get that glare, or just offensive lighting that you would get from LED bulbs, I think is the right way to go.
Yeah,
Okay.
the-
Comment? Go ahead.
So
Yes, please.
with LED lighting, again, there's a range of color temperatures that factor into this, and incandescent bulbs are at that 2700 Kelvin range. A lot of times what we see is the blinding ones are the ones that are approaching 5000, like on people's headlights and certain street lights. I think the city of Columbus standard is at 3000 as opposed to the 2700. If the issue is simply the brightness and the color, that's controllable with the specific bulb. Now, that doesn't mean in the future that somebody, a rogue bad actor wouldn't go in and put a color changing bulb in there and play with it when I do at home and at Lebec. But the intent here is this is for a historical museum, and we want to use 2700 Kelvin bulb at a low light level. So that's something that we can certainly work with maintenance and our owner to maintain correctly and appropriately.
And just to add to that, not that it, makes it consistent with the plan or that somebody could, go back and change it in the future. That is something that you all could make a condition that they note that on the actual plan set of drawings, that is the type of bulb that's supposed to be in this fixture. And that's something I would look for when I get their drawings before I stamp them to make sure that that note is on.
Have we talked this one to death yet?
We have screening
I'd entertain a motion at this point.
use.
Stephanie said screening.
Yeah, the screening is the other staff recommendation, but
Okay, well, screening, did we have an issue with screening?
We don't have an issue with the screening.
Go. So, all right, I'll try. Move to approve with following conditions. Applicant to work with city forester to incorporate street trees as appropriate along West Broad Street and North Mill Street. Applicant to provide, be fully shielded light fixtures. Is there any particular?
With appropriate LED bulb.
are we doing fully shielded and bulb, or is the bulb in lieu of fully shielded? Basically, like,
Yeah.
are you saying that this light fixture is okay if they use a specific bulb? This fixture's okay? Or are you saying this fixture's not okay?
Well, staff report said shielding was required.
Yes,
I
the
was-
staff recommendation is that it is in line with plan recommendation, but you all have the authority to vary that. So if you guys think that the fixture is okay with or without a specific bulb, you can grant that modification.
I think the picture's okay with the shielding that the staff report is suggesting. Is that right?
Yes, but I'm not sure that they can fully shield this fixture. So that might get a little messy, because it looks like.
Yeah.
And if they come, if they can't, they're going to be coming back with a separate application for modifications, right?
Yes.
And we've kind of agreed to that procedure. I think the applicant's in agreement with that. Right?
Absolutely.
Like,
I'm not a lighting expert, but when I hear shielding, there's shielding that you put in the enclosure that.
It's a shroud.
Right, that prevents the light, that only thrusts the light one direction, or however the shielding works,
I
right?
just wasn't sure, just looking at this fixture, if that would be an option, because it has that like metal
If you put it in the metal.
grate around it.
It would be a different fixture. If this has to be fully shielded, it's either a post-manufactured attachment that will cut it off so that you have the profile and then you can't see the bulb, or it's a different fixture. It's, you're putting a hood on a bulb, that's the requirement.
That is up to you all.
Are we approving any fixtures that are not fully shielded?
I'm aesthetically for this because I think from a light, if I had to choose better lighting or the aesthetically, like you were saying, it's this or it's gonna be something that like doesn't necessarily have this, knowing this is what you guys are doing is a strict building. I'm for aesthetically this light, but again, if that's just my opinion on this.
And I like the light too.
I'm okay with the fixture if we specify the light bulb.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we're not doing fully shielded, then we're specifying lighting. Do we know what light to specify?
So
Now, you said I thought you said a city standard, or somebody said a city standard.
they said the city standard, but did you have a recommendation on the, no?
All right, what? Now I'm confused. Not being a lighting
I
expert
just
myself.
off the top of my head, what is an appropriate, like, element of light to be emitted for,
I defer to the city lighting expert.
Staff approval of the lighting, of the bulb? All right, here we
check in
go.
with some other folks.
Now we got something going here. All right, let's start over.
Okay.
Except for the one light fixture we're fixing, right?
Excuse me?
We're getting rid of the one light fixture, the light,
Which one light fixture?
up lighting.
Oh, the uplights.
It's
Okay,
it's
the uplight. Okay, so let's go with that. All right. Move to approve following conditions, applicant to work with city forester to incorporate street trees as appropriate along West Broad Street and North Mill Street. Applicant to provide fully shielded light fix, well, applicant provide
Proposed light fixture,
excuse me?
proposed light fixture.
The,
Lights with, yeah,
Lights first.
appropriate, applicant to provide appropriate site, light source, that, the appropriateness of which shall be, subject to staff approval. We are not approving, and we do not approve, let's see. The uplighting,
It's removed from the
is removed from the application. And provide screening in accordance with plan guidelines on the north property line as well as for the loading service area and any ground and or roof mounted mechanical. That's a mouthful.
make me work for it after the holiday.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the application, subject to the stated conditions.
Who was our second?
Second. Chair moves, King second.
Okay,
Okay?
I'm going to read that back to you.
Go ahead and read back.
Okay.
Dare you.
So I've got a motion by Mr. Burgess for conditional approval with the conditions being that the applicant work with city forester, street trees as appropriate. West Broad Street and Middle Street, remove the uplight fixture from the application, approving the radial light fixture with appropriate bulb. Screening as stated in the staff report of the north property line, loading service area, and any ground or roof mounted mechanical. Things are staff.
Call roll, please.
Okay. Mr. Burgess,
Approve.
Mr. White,
Approve.
Mr. Nobby,
Approve.
Ms. Bender,
Approved.
Mr. Sweeney,
Oh, approve.
Ms. Hamilton. Approved. Carries.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bit of pulling teeth there, but we got it done.
I appreciate the discussion.
Okay. Next application, EF 2211-002, address is 480 West Town Street. Blake Compton is the agent for the owner, and Timothy A. Bass is the applicant. Staff report, please.
So this property actually has the next two applications, so I just did one staff report. The first part, the 2211-02 is for action, and then the 003 is conceptual. So we'll talk about them all at once, but then we'll just take action on the one that's requesting action.
Very good.
So 480 West Town Street is an existing single-story commercial building at the corner of West Town and McDowell Street in the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The applicant is requesting review and approval to add outdoor dining to the previously approved eating and drinking establishment. The original application was reviewed by DFRB in April 2021, with the board approving the change of use in addition to the development standard modifications for a parking reduction of 14 spaces and to allow exterior lighting that is directed upward. The proposed changes include changing a window on the south elevation to a door to access the outdoor dining, changing the previously approved wall sconce light fixtures to flush mount lights. There's two different styles and the materials, but the quantity of lights is not changing. Adding open and closed light above the front door on the southeast corner. Adding a 5-foot 9.5-inch by 61-foot 3-inch outdoor patio to include tables and chairs and a 2.5-foot high metal fencing, the finished colors to be determined. The applicant is also requesting conceptual review of a roof-mounted sign and to discuss other potential signage and graphics options. The proposed signage and graphics includes an 18-foot 1-inch wide by 2.5-foot high roof-mounted marquee style sign on the south elevation, a peace, love, and pancake balls mural on the east elevation, and a wayfinding sign for the parking. The style is to be determined. That'll be on the north elevation. Staff analysis. The East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan states that sidewalk dining should be supported. The addition of the outdoor patio is consistent with this recommendation. The applicant is proposing two options for the fencing. The board should discuss the options and make a recommendation. Staff notes the Department of Public Service has jurisdiction and final approval authority over any work occurring in the right of way. Additionally, both the zoning code and plan state that wall-mounted lights should be fully shielded and directed downward to minimize glare and shine above the horizontal plane. The proposed light fixtures are inconsistent with these recommendations. The applicant has noted the lenses will be frosted to diffuse the light. Plan also recommends street trees on all public streets and that landscape materials and design should be used to create and define public and private spaces and provide aesthetic appeal. Staff notes the applicant has reached out to the city forester and was advised that street trees would not be appropriate at this location. As such, staff recommends the applicant add planter boxes outside of the proposed fencing for the patio to provide additional buffer between patrons and the street. If EF 2211-002 is approved, the board will grant the following modification to the East Franklinton District Development Standards to allow exterior lighting that is not fully shielded and directed downward. Staff recommends conditional support of the application EF 2211-002 with the condition being the applicant add planter boxes along the patio fence. In regards to the proposed signage and graphics, a wide range of design styles are appropriate for East Franklinton, but roof-mounted and bare bulb signs are both listed as appropriate graphics. Therefore, the Catalina sign is inconsistent with the East Franklinton graphic design guidelines and city code. As such, there's no design guidelines for evaluating a prohibited sign type. The board has the authority to vary these standards and should discuss the size, placement, and style with the applicant. In addition to the roof sign, the applicant is proposing a mural that will contain commercial copy and require review and approval by the EFRB. Size and exact design to be determined. A parking wayfinding sign is also being considered. The applicant is proposing either the antique sign or a painted wall sign. The board should review the examples provided and discuss with the applicant in context with the proposed roof sign. The applicant will return for final review and approval of graphics and signage. As this is conceptual review, no action will be taken. So for EF 22-1102, staff's recommending conditional support, with the condition being that they add planter boxes along the patio fence.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Evelyn,
Yes.
so when you're recommending planter boxes, do you have anything in mind? There's not like a city standard for planter boxes, or is there?
No, to my knowledge, but like I said, the public service folks will get the final say in it. I was just thinking something of landscaping material in between the diners and the street.
And I was, dimensionally within the 6 feet that they have to do that. I don't know if that's impedes the flow or, so I don't, I guess we're just gonna wait, see what comes back.
Yeah, and I mean, even if they weren't something that was like a built element, even if it was something like hanging on the fence, I don't know how that works with public service folks, if that's considered like additional encroachment into the right of way.
And I was thinking the same thing. Maybe that would be better. Yeah.
And to me, it's kind of like the city forester condition that if public service comes back and says no, then they kind of trump the condition.
Question, do we have a theory or know why the city forester advised that street trees are not appropriate for this location?
The applicant can probably speak to that quicker than I can. They did mention it in the email.
Anybody have a theory?
The sidewalk is only 6 feet, so once you put a tree in there, setback from this, it's probably impeding the flow of pedestrians.
And
would be my guess.
potentially the proximity to the intersection.
It could be sightlines.
Yeah, there's some weird sight lines at that intersection.
Yeah, going the other direction there is for sure. Like looking to the east, absolutely, to the west, no problem at all. I mean, I think the city forester has all the power to dictate this, yes?
Yes.
But if you put a 4x4 plant,
Maybe
pit in, right, and you have a tree grate or however it's designed, and you really only have 2 feet left, that's sidewalk to walk by, if there isn't a tree grate or something on top of it. So it's tight to put street trees in.
I can pull up their email if you want to bring the applicant up and start discussing with them if you have any other questions for me, but they may know, they may remember off the top of their head what the reason is.
Just curious about the reason.
Okay. Are we,
Yeah, bring that.
okay, all right, let's just make sure we're moving on from that exchange. All right, applicant, step forward, please. State your name for the record, please.
My name is Tim Bass, I'm the Bass Studio Architects. Kathleen would like to extend an apology. She is maybe with COVID, so she wanted to be here for the conceptual discussion.
Well, we don't want her here if she has COVID. It's not a problem there.
No,
Okay, and
Arturo's,
we have another person here. State your name, please.
Arturo Manes.
And gentlemen, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Floor is yours.
Okay, so really, there are two proposals for a sidewalk lease barrier, basically is what we're here for. The signage is a conceptual discussion because city staff informed us that there were issues with the signage guidelines and the branded piece that we have. The barrier, we actually did approach the city forester after we discussed it with staff with the recommendation that there were trees, and we put a diagram together with the trees, and the forester felt that there wasn't enough room. There's a certain required setback from the street, and then there's a canopy, and there are clearances, and they simply came back and said this isn't, that was the word from the forester. So it may be similar to it's a rehab on the street. Rehab Tavern also, similar sites, similar clearances, and no trees. So I think that's the information that we have on that. The barrier is presented, there's a preferred scheme, which is a bent mesh, tight wire mesh that would become actually barrier and tables. And so it's barrier, not barrier. We really like the idea of no barrier. The second scheme is if that is too expensive and the budget won't allow that, then we come back to a more standard fence-like barrier. We actually approached the city right-of-way division before talking with the EFRB, and we had a more opaque barrier that would have been a wood-like barrier, just responding to what we saw in the area, the wooden barriers across the street and down the way. We were informed we had to be transparent for police, so we just responded to that. And I guess I would address also the planter boxes. Were you thinking those could be out by the curb and
Along the fence,
pardon me?
along the fence.
Along the fence. So the challenge is there are minimums out there. We have a telephone pole, a sign, some sort of funny bollard that looks like a horse post. And we have to have 6 feet between that and any sidewalk barrier. And if you look at the plan of the sidewalk lease, it's not generous. We have only 2 tops in there. It's going to be the next, if you go to the one, either the next, yeah. So we just have room for an aisle and a 2-top table because of that barrier. The whole shaded area is the required barrier, or I'm sorry, the required passage for ADA. And so we started at our intrusions there, the sign and the bollard and the telephone pole. And that's on the bottom of the drawing. The bottom of the shaded area is where those occur. We move our 6 feet, and that's where we line up the barrier. And if it's any tighter, we don't have room for an aisle and tables. So that's why I was thinking we would love to have plants out there. We would love to see some relief out there. If the city would allow us to do it in to the west of these posts that we have on the east end of the site, we could put them out on that part of the sidewalk. I don't know how that works with a lease, but that's where we have room. South of the shaded area is a little piece of sidewalk that is open because the other barriers are on this end of the sidewalk. They're on the east end. And the whole west side of that is open, but we have to accommodate that 6-foot passage for ADA. So that makes it a little tight. I suppose we could try to figure out some small planters between the 2 seats where they abut. We have a little bit of room we show there, and we could try to get small plants in there, but I'm not sure how viable that little piece of medium would be for plants surviving.
So I've been looking at this building for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a lot of sidewalk there.
There is a lot of sidewalk.
A lot.
Yep.
And there used to be trees there. I remember they were knocked out by cars at the time, and they were not knocked out because they're turning distance. They were knocked out because town streets have a freeway. And that's something that we should think about sometime. But so you're telling me this is the wheelchair access?
That's
ADA?
the little section on the number 2 drawing there. That is right out of the city code, right, for sidewalk. So that's 6 feet is a requirement. That's a direct lift from the right-of-way people.
Where's the property lines?
Out on there's a curb line. We're outside of the property line already. The face of the building is the property line here. So this is actually a request for a sidewalk lease.
And that's the furthest the city would give you, that's 5'9.5" inches.
So that's what's left when we start with our barrier, our intrusions and north.
You're saying that the signs and the posts set,
Yeah,
those are not movable, so you
there's a
still.
sign and a post and a telephone pole, I think is that a telephone pole. And so we start there and
I wasn't aware that 6 feet was a requirement for ADA in a sidewalk.
Yeah, it seems a little large, but, that's right out of the right of way
I thought it was
guideline.
4 feet.
I was just trying to look that up.
Yeah.
I thought it was 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It's not our computer. It's right out, we just lifted it right off the guideline.
When you say guideline, what do you refer to?
It comes from the right of way department.
Okay.
Sure, just Columbus boulevards or right of ways.
Yeah, sure.
They're the people we have to ask for the lease, and they review this drawing and they say, meet these standards.
Is that the new statements for Columbus?
I'm not
So I
sure.
know they've been redone recently.
Or if it's something specific, because this is a right-of-way piece. That's maybe like an additional requirement
Right.
to be able to lease the space. Familiar with those standards.
You know, I'm happy to submit it with with a 5 foot, but I mean, this is what they gave us.
Yeah, the right-of-way folks will get the final say on it, so even if the board approved it with 5 foot or 4 foot, and they came back and said, well, our standards say 6, it would need to be 6, so.
Right. So we just sort of check the boxes and end up with the plan that we have.
I'm with Mr. Sweeney about street trees. You know, they have some great varieties now that are columnar that don't impede things. But again, it's the ADA
Yeah.
tree grade.
The,
Is
The
that,
email from the forester said that there's no room for trees on McDowell due to the stop sign, and that planting trees on town may cause ADA compliance issues between the fencing and then tree wells or planters.
but if they were not tree wells, but tree pits with a tree grade over them, is that still ADA accessible? I would assume it is, but
This is what they use, this is what they send out.
with the tree. And then 6 feet.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Mhm.
So, what's that first 2.5 feet off the curb?
That's where we have impediments. We have signs and
Oh.
pole and
Yeah.
bollards. And so we start there. That's our first free space where the shading starts. So I'm also happy, I mean, the problem, when we laid it out, or the actual clear area for the tree trunk is in our,
It's inside of.
yeah, so I think that's why he recommended not, but we can put it in there with trees and see if, I mean, we can ask the forester to tell us no again.
It's up to you.
You need a minimum 4-foot tree pit for a tree. And the tree sits in the middle of that, so basically the tree trunk will be 2 feet back, which according to that cross section then starts to get into the 6 feet. So that's where it's very tight. So it's,
Yeah, we can be a little closer to the street. You can get an oblong, is that right?
Yep.
So we can get a little out of square with the tree grate. We showed
3 by
this
6.
and he still felt like no. So happy to make him tell us no again, but this is,
Well, again, the difference might be a tree pit versus a tree with a tree grate around it, which provides a surface, right? That's not that something can roll over.
oh, yeah.
And I don't know if he reviewed it with that in mind. I don't know if you were talking about doing it just a tree pit or a tree and tree grate.
Yeah, I don't think we would have any room for the pit that we'd only have, what do we have there? 2 foot, 2.8. So the tree grate's the only way we could really, I think, get that done.
Yeah, right.
And that's, some of them are attenuated. We looked at those and they still need to be, the tree has to be, 18 inches from the curb is what the problem gets to be. So our trunk starts to crawl into the part clearance. But again, happy to put them on that plan and ask the forester, because we like trees too, but this is just where we arrived.
As the applicant, if you want street trees, then you think that if there's another opportunity to kind of make that pitch, I encourage you to do that. I would be supportive of it,
I'm happy to ask again.
but the forester is going to make the final say, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so.
The alternate suggestion would be potentially maybe proposing to the forester planters in that strip that could be narrower and long. You know, instead of just asking him about trees again, which it sounds like you already proposed trees with grates and the tree trunk would be in the way. That might be, you know, another way to get some type of greenery in the space and again, provide an additional buffer for diners, but.
So we can, happy to sort of structure it so that, I mean, I'm willing to ask right away, it's 5 feet instead of 6. I'm happy to ask city forester to take a shot at the trees and see if they, and happy to talk about the planters as well. So we'd love some green in the area. We just kind of are pinched on. It's the same, if you look at rehab, they have the same relationship. Their building sits farther back, but between their barrier and the sidewalk, it's just bleak.
Well, it looks like, just from a quick search, that ADA says 36 to 48 inches clearance, but this 6-foot thing is Columbus specific, so.
Right.
I'd like to point out how important this project is to the neighborhood. While it's relatively small in scale, given the visibility and the location, the corner entrance, the strategic spot, incredibly important, and that's why I'm asking this tree question. Sure. And I know nobody here disagrees with the project or anything you're saying so far, I should say. And that's, I wonder, we talked about trees today twice. I wonder, is it appropriate for us to sit down and talk to the forester about the way things work? I mean, it's pretty relevant. We're essentially building a very dense neighborhood around up, and a lot of ways, trees would be a big part of it, but this doesn't make any sense to me. This is plenty of space for everything here. I mean, I'm sure they have good rationale. So just a side note, not for you. So, and I appreciate your willingness to try something.
Happy to take another run at the forester and say, look, why don't we take a shot at it?
Great.
And I mean, it may be that it's not supported because he doesn't think the trees would be viable if we push them too close to the sidewalk, but.
I'd hate to see this be a bare sidewalk for lack of creativity or conversation.
So happy to have that conversation.
Okay. So, just want to get clear where we're at with respect to the planter boxes along the patio fence. Applicant has stated that you could do, I gather you could do a limited, planters along fence lines. Is that correct?
Yeah, we could, this is the second one. So I think we might be able to, I just don't know how much we need to make plants viable. There's not a lot of room in this whole lease. I was kind of thinking that if we weren't doing the trees, if we do the trees, maybe we let the planter boxes go and see if we can get the forester to come along on the trees.
The recommendation to add the planters was because trees were not supported, and it was just to add some additional buffer there, so.
All right. So is it possible the forester would approve planters in lieu of trees?
I'm not sure.
Hmm?
I'm not sure.
Don't know that one.
Planters in this sort of, in this 2-foot area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Something would be better than.
So I'm not sure how to put that into a motion, but to some extent, this would be, well, first of all, we're going to be approving the application on the condition that the applicant work with the city forester to determine appropriate plantings of trees or planter boxes along the town street right of way. Is that correct? Everybody agree with that? If they're not appropriate, then we're going to have a requirement for planters along the fence that are, the design and placement of which is subject to staff approval.
I think they're making the case that there's not room there.
Yeah, but we can put it,
Um,
you can't put it within the 6 feet, that's.
Yeah, it sounds, so I wasn't aware of that when I made this recommendation. My suggestion was like if you hung planter boxes on the fence, but then that encroaches in that gray area.
That gray area.
So, um,
So,
to me, it doesn't achieve the purpose if they can put plants inside the fence. So,
so planters are out.
yeah, so I would say,
We'll go with the city forester and see if the city forester will accommodate something there, right?
yeah.
Okay, all right, we're good, let's go. I'm going to make a motion now.
two other things.
Yep.
So there is a development standard modification for the lighting. It is not fully shielded or directed downward. In the application that you all approved, the April 2021 application, you granted a modification for lighting at that point as well. So I would just encourage you to look at the lighting they're proposing and see if you're okay with it. You would be approving that modification, and then also they're proposing the two different styles of fence and basically asking for approval for either, depending on budget. So clarifying that as well.
Okay, does any of that need to be in the motion?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go then. Move that we approve the application on the condition that the applicant work with the city forester to determine the appropriateness of street trees or planters along the town street right away.
Okay.
So moved.
So what about the fence and the lighting? We have two different options for the fence, so
Yes. So
we haven't discussed that.
We haven't discussed that, no, all right, I'll withdraw the motion for the moment.
Okay.
Let's talk about that. Go ahead, Rick, Kevin.
So I appreciate what you're trying to do with the fence to take kind of a standard look and try to do something creative with it, right? If it was, I don't think you took it far enough. Because if you're really going to transform it into like an arc fence or something, I think that would be really great. But what you're proposing as the alternative to me doesn't look complete or well thought through. It also doesn't look actually that safe because you've got these big openings. I think the option B, which is just your typical fence, just is clean and simple, and I can buy into that, but I just don't understand what the other one is trying to achieve. So I guess I would, without it going totally being this art fence, as opposed to just a modified wire mesh, I would go with the kind of the option B, just because it's clean and simple. My opinion.
Discussion?
We see option B. Option B better.
So if you all would only be in support of option B, then we would want to make that a condition as well, that they go forward with option B.
Okay. We'll add that to the motion.
If everybody else is supportive of that.
All right, I'll read that motion back then.
Lights.
Lighting.
Lighting.
Yep.
All right, one more.
So and I think we'll talk a little bit about the brand too when we talk about the sign, but Kathleen's brand is very focused on vintage and collectibles, and I don't know if you've ever been in her place, but she found these, she's very fond of them, and there are 4 spots on the building where she would like to replace the approved lights with these. And we see the approved lights have a diffuse illuminated section on the top of them. And so we thought if we put an opalescent film on the glass on these, that it would really be no different than what we see on the top of their current fixtures. So that was the proposal with the, taking the vintage pieces and altering the lens so that we have a, just a diffuse light.
I have no problem with those.
The approved fixtures were wall sconces that do up and down lighting with that diffuser on the top for
Yeah.
lighting.
Yeah, they have there's a picture of them actually in the, I don't know if you have this. The, existing lights, those are actually existing with building, they have the white piece on top. So we would take those off and put these on. And also they can be lamped down. She's not open at night. And in the seasons when it would be dark during her hours, people probably not sitting outside. So she doesn't have a great need for nighttime lighting, so they can be dialed back to just be visible. Kind of like her signs.
So the, what was the word, frosting? On the.
Right, frostbite.
That's like shielding somebody. It's not total shielding, but it's like diffusing it. So I don't have a problem with the lights. They're funky. They're kind of unusual. I think they go with the vibe of the area. So
Do we want to require the frosting on the lenses?
Yes.
I think that's, the applicant has already
Right.
offered that. So
Okay, all right.
I would make that a condition since
Yeah,
it's shown
okay.
in the application as submitted.
Oh, and there was one other light. I don't know if you've seen them, but she always finds a interesting open and closed sign. And so she has found it looks like a nautical fixture in your package. Oh, there it is. And so it would be green for open and red for closed, and that would go over the door, and there's a light fixture there.
it is nautical.
Pardon me?
Isn't it stern and bow, or not stern and bow? It's the
It's port,
Starboard.
yeah, right. Red right returning is all I know.
I think they're cool.
I like it.
So that little piece, we just didn't want to not mention it.
All right, we have a complete motion yet. Read it on back then, please.
Okay. So I've got conditional approval with conditions that they work with the city forester, revisiting the options for street trees or planters along the town street right away. That they received an option for the fencing and the condition that those light fixtures be frosted.
All right, we have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to approve the application.
Is that Mr. Jones? Like, sorry, I wasn't looking at your faces. Mr. Burris,
Approved.
Mr. Witt,
Approved.
Mr. Nalby,
Approved.
Ms. Benner,
Approved.
Mr. Sweeney,
Approved.
and Ms. Hamilton. Approved. Motion carried.
All right, let's move on to the conceptual phase of this then.
So I'll share this quickly. I don't think you have it. These are the previous two locations of Catalina's. And again, she's very brand oriented, and I don't know if you're familiar with her places, but she's also got a big online presence. And she really wanted to be here to share her branding with you, and I can't do it justice, but all I can say is that is a very identifiable, that's a really iconic sign for her places. And she calls it a vintage circus sign. But it does have the exposed light bulbs, but they are so dim. In that image, they are all on, and you can barely see them. They were approved in Harrison West, and she's got one on High Street in Clintonville, pretty much the exact same sign. And so I'm not sure what to say other than it's very important to her, and it's important to her brand. It's kind of, as far as the sign being above the roof here, we have a couple issues. We have the lights that we just talked about in the field where we would put a sign of this character or this size. So that's one issue. But we also have a building that's fairly diminutive. And I really feel like putting that sign up above will give it that space in front of it a little more presence, especially if we put the trees in. So I feel like I can't really speak to I don't know why the no bare lamps are there. I can imagine from a graphics person's perspective, there are a lot of reasons, but these are minimally illuminated little bulbs. But putting it above the roof seems like a really simple gesture to be a little more present here. And happy to talk about the lights in it. We actually have a sign drawing from Signcom, who is a neighbor and did her sign in Clintonville for us, Bruce Sommerfeld. And he was more than happy to start to talk about alternatives with us after we talked to Stephanie. And he came up with the idea of putting holes in and illuminating it from behind. And I just think the idea of a polka dotted sign like that is not quite going to carry it. So I'm not sure what she would do if you guys don't approve that. So.
I think it's the size and location of the sign more than the lighting that's an issue with the development standards, is it not?
Both. The plan specifically says bare bulb signs, and then it also says roof mounted signs.
Yeah.
But again, we'll have the ability to modify that, so.
The only thing, and for those of you new to the board, this is kind of my role, is to point out that whatever we do today may have precedential value in future applications. So that's something we need to be careful of, to at least be able, if we're going to approve something that is a departure from the standards, we should have a reason that is reasonably specific to this property.
I have a question. You said that they're not open for in the evening, not past lunch. Does that mean all the lights get turned on?
I think she leaves her sign on at night. And I think that she has cafe lights in Harrison West. I think she leaves those on.
So it's not like completely black. It's not like.
No, it's not black, no.
Most important intersection.
No, but it's interesting, we were talking about it on the way down. It seems like if any district would have a little leeway for an artistic gesture like this, it would be this one. It is across the street from a 100-foot long purple octopus. And they also have the cafe lights, which are not terribly different from the lights in the frame of the sign here. So I don't know. It's kind of a whimsical artistic gesture. So. And it is such a long, low building. It would be really nice to break that profile in some way.
And I did ask them to include the information, even though it's even more conceptual than this, about the mural, and then also the potential parking sign, to take into consideration if you are thinking about any modifications, how the entire sign package would work together. And the plan does generally recommend like 2 signage elements, and this is proposed 3, so just taking all that into consideration when we're talking about.
So you read the mural as a sign element?
Yeah, because then the pancake balls gives a commercial copy, so.
Peace love pancake balls. Peace love, yeah. Well, that's also a sort of brand specific thing she has on all of her properties. So in the parking sign, I think we don't have it yet. I just know she has it on each of the other properties with the parking in the rear. In Harrison West, it's a really cool old parking sign with an arrow she found. In Clintonville, we did, Bruce had Cobalt, who is actually another neighbor here, paint her sign on it. So Cobalt will be involved, Bruce Sommerfeld will be involved. They're both over on Ridge. So that's the Clintonville, which was a very different character than Harrison West. So we don't know what we're doing with that. I just wanted to throw it out that she has those when we have this conceptual discussion.
Quick question. Why do we need a parking sign in the parking lot? Just to tell people which way to go?
Actually, yeah, more than anything, in Clintonville it was necessary. On 3rd Avenue, it was really just, she found a cool neon sign. It's a real neon sign. So she thought that was interesting.
Designed to have like traffic flow off of McDowell into the alley. Am I forgetting that part? There's a fence there now, right? Pull in, pull out.
Yeah, right. Parking in the back. There's one way in, one way out.
Okay, so why have a sign
On the other side of the building.
to go around the building?
I don't know.
No. This would be, I think, on the east facade. The little parking thing.
Parking,
It's on the,
isn't that mural, the pancake thing on the east facade? So
It is.
two things on the same wall?
no, that's,
So I thought that this was gonna be proposed on the north elevation, pointing at the parking lot.
But you mean the south elevation or the north is the parking?
Right, so I thought this would be like if you're looking at the building from the north elevation, it would be an arrow pointing, people basically turn here to get into the parking.
Oh, as if you're heading south on McDowell, you'll be able to see the
Yes.
sign pulling here.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah, well, clearly we don't have a signage plan here, but we have those elements on the other properties. I think if you guys said, we don't want that parking sign, she would say fine, but I know she would go to the mat over the Peace, Love, and Pancake Balls. Because if you go on Instagram, you see people with their selfies in front of those. And we have one inside and outside at Clintonville.
I actually love that. So I love that graphic, whether you call it a sign or not. I think that's very appropriate for the district. I don't think you need the parking sign. And I think the Catalina sign needs not to be above the roof line, needs to be integrated with the facade. And the code says no bare bulb, so is there another option that still captures that same effect?
So we have to reconcile it with these lamps that are already on the building. Take them out or push it down onto the windows.
You're replacing those, right?
Well, if we push the sign down, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, you can reconcile it with those, I would think.
That's.
Like, what if it was over on the far left in that, but there is no lights, it's like Catalina's there.
But narrow what
It
up.
was red. Would that achieve the same? I'm just not willing to vary the code based on what Mr. Burgess said about setting precedent. Because we haven't approved any signs like that in the past.
What is the concern of putting it up, it is because of the height, right? Why was it written in the code, or what happens when we approve this, what other things might?
Well, all right, so as to the code, I can't reach inside the heads of city council, so I have no idea why the code is written as it is. But as far as precedent goes, if we approve this and somebody else comes along with a similar design, we're going to be hard pressed to say no.
Imagine this on the top of a 5-story building.
So it's interesting though, the whole graphics thing is so interesting because all of my professional career, we were not allowed to have signs on state routes. So none on High Street, none on the Broad Street, and along comes Orange Barrel, making an amazing amount of money on putting these giant signs everywhere, and they're really cool. So, and if I think of the most amazing sign in Columbus, it might be the dispatch building sign. And that happens to be on the roof of the building. So I don't know why graphics people do that. I think they're vital. And the North Market, I think they have some vitality and add interest. And like I said, I would love to break the profile of this long, low building, given the excitement across the street and down the street and River Ridge. I mean, there's a lot going on, and you push that sign down into this relentless long, low profile, and she's not going to get a lot of attention. So I understand there's a guideline. I also understand that I have no idea why that's a guideline. Honestly, I think they can be very interesting. I don't know if there's some way to condition this so that it's specific to a site or a small one-story building, or I don't know. I just don't know. But I understand the question about the standards, why it's a standard, but I have no idea. I just know they're very interesting signs often.
And the reason I think having this conversation conceptually is important, and it's because you all do have the authority to vary those standards, is working with the applicant to come up with some type of compromises if you are going to grant a modification to, maybe bring this part in line if you're not gonna bring this, and the number of signs, and that's why we wanna talk about the full package as one, and to your point, that if there is a modification granted, that you can cite a very specific why, so that.
Yeah, it's gotta be very, you're right, but it's gotta be quite specific as to site, as to why we're approving it.
Stephanie, does staff have any comments as far as why that's a requirement for signage?
As far as why that was a standard in the first place, I'm not sure. I think that generally, it could probably get out of hand. Is why, what if someone wanted to put a roof sign on top of Levesque, or, then they could essentially become billboards along the highway on top of buildings. I think that's probably the intention, to prohibit things like that, but as far as like the exact reason why it was written in the code, I'm not sure.
My guess is that there are a lot of great examples of really cool ones. There's probably a lot more examples. Ones just look like trash. Yeah, that I'm just Googling right now. I could see a few that we wouldn't want. I think roof line signs are popular in like strip malls, and which is, not. But I think a case by case basis personally.
And I would push back on that a little, that the creative signage is very historic. I mean, we've seen signs like this throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s. I don't even have a big issue with the very low lumen bulbs. I've seen the other Catalina signs. I'm typically a stickler when it comes to lighted signs. I think that the options that you're thinking of to mitigate and make it look similar are probably going to be tacky and not as nice as this. And I think that it could be very easy for me personally to defend that this is a very monotonous, low rise building. And so adding some interest to the roof line, I don't find it offensive at all. I think it would kind of take away from the overall design that you all are working toward, to slide that sign down onto the facade and perhaps, move those lights around, or whatever might need to happen in order for that to happen. That's my 2 cents on that.
Like it.
I like it. I like it on the top of the building. I think it serves the building well. I think it would be doing a disservice to the building and to the signage, frankly, if it were dropped down onto that facade.
As far as the light bulbs are concerned, I don't have that big a problem with that, provided that, again, just like the last application, staff approval of the lighting intensity.
Well, and typically these are very low intensity bulbs.
Right.
On a sign like that.
I understand that.
I would add, as for the precedent point, just this conversation on record, I think will give us ease to know the next time it comes along, we don't want to give the same variance. We've already had the conversation and established that it's our option to vary the code if we want. We are not going to do it for everyone. It's going to be a case by case basis.
Historically appropriate, I think, is a possibility. We may have another occasional applicant come along who's got what they consider to be equally historic signage that they want to put up, but that is at least one possibility. The general location of the building and low profile is another possibility. Kim, you get your opinion on that.
Well, I appreciate Francis' comment about it has a historic quality to it. I don't see anything historic about this building. In fact, they've taken it in a different direction. So I would have a hard time defending that. We're doing this because it's reflecting the historic nature of the building. I totally agree.
And I don't think that's where I was going with that.
No, I'm just saying in general. I wouldn't say where you were going. I'm just saying I perceive it.
It's not that I think that there's a historic element to the building that this is emphasizing. I like the creativity of the signage in this application. And I think that because the building is kind of lackluster, then maybe this serves a big purpose in moving that very obvious corner to a little bit different level.
There's the argument right therefore doing it on a historic, I mean, that architecture just begs for a sign like that, right?
What about on top here?
This one right here. I mean,
Yeah.
more so than this, right? But I mean, that just all works together. I'm just struggling with this building in general because I agree totally. It's boring, low, horizontal. There's nothing
The
great.
mayor didn't make the meeting.
But then when I also think about our responsibility to small business owners and their brands and how important that is, and when, when redundancy is very important from brand location to brand location, I certainly want to err always on the side of supporting those bricks and mortar business owners too.
I was almost willing to go, the kind of the in-between argument is, okay, bring it down on the facade, but leave the bulbs on. So the bulbs gives it texture, and I was kind of like that could work, but you all are new to the board. Bill and I have been on a long time, and we've been trying to hold this line about setting precedent because a lot of stuff comes at us and you don't know how it's going to come. I mean, the argument that we can limit that approval of the sign in this location on this particular application, I don't know, Bill, does that hold up pretty strongly?
Judge Fergus has no clear answer to that.
It's just, that's my fear.
And do we have clear, good argument for violating any, you know what I mean? Giving the variances in any instance? Probably not. But I could really say that if a similar project came up with a similar lackluster building and they wanted a sign similar to this, I would again say that's probably a good application. Now, if somebody wanted to, put a sign like this on the top of the Lebec Tower, that might be a different conversation.
Or a 5-story building down the street.
Different conversation.
And here's the thing, we're dealing with a small business, very local brand here. What if that said Donato's on top of it?
Well, that's why we have discretion, right? That's why we're here.
Yeah, no, that's right.
To protect-
Yeah, that would be,
Yeah.
to me, that would be a different thing.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
I'm very interested in the height level. I think this is like the low, like if we were to approve this, I think there's absolutely to the height of what this building is how we could speak to it to say, to keep it in that. And I agree, as a business, that is an identifier. I like it up because I do think it's different and I think it catches an eye and I think it makes it stand out in a cool way. And Catalina's is a staple in Columbus. I don't think anyone would be offended by that. But again, I agree, if we were to approve this, right, it's the Dunkin' Donuts, it's the Donato's that we could feel. But I think that there's a height to it that nothing else is going to come close to in Franklinton. Okay. Or if it does, okay, Donato's can, there's just something about this building that, I don't know.
I think what you just said is an excellent argument for us to pursue potential approval of this. And maybe we recognize that East Franklinton has a number of one-story buildings that don't provide the character to the street environment that the plan envisions, and that we believe that additional elements like signage can help give it a little bit more three-dimensional qualities to it or something like that, and limit it to kind of a discussion about a one-story building. Now that doesn't, if it's a one-story Donato's or it's one-story something else, but maybe that's okay.
Yeah,
But maybe that's
so maybe we approve a historically appropriate Donato sign.
Francis, you work in towns all over Ohio, right? That you don't see that proven in the.
No, but I encourage it. I mean, there are big problems in communities that have homogenized their complete downtown. And, you use this sign palette and this font and everything looks exactly the same.
Right.
So I think it's terrible that we do that. So that's why I feel like boards like this exist, so that we can give that creativity license to the local brand.
I think we'll be able to find a way. I think through this discussion, I think we have enough here to,
Jim's not,
Would they-
Jim's
would they
got
use-
something. Jim's definitely got something.
I hate to say it, but again, this is such a, why didn't you put it on the corner facing 10th Street?
It's too big.
I mean, it's,
Has to bend, it has to be different.
Like over the door, you're saying?
yeah, put
Yeah,
it
it does
45
look
degrees
nice.
over the corner entrance. You can see it up and down McDowell, up and
I
down
like
town.
that.
Going back to the
I mean,
Spanish.
who's it shining it now? My back door, that's it. I mean, there's nothing across. I mean, I don't know if there's something across Town Street, but who's even to see the sign?
Where's your back door?
I live at 500 West. So my back door looks right at that building.
But it's, you won't see that sign.
I don't care if I see it. That's not my. It's lovely. I want to see it. I love looking at the picture.
Politics is a little.
I'm just, that's why we have, exactly, you're hyper local, where we are. But I don't know. That's just a suggestion. I think it would be way cooler if you could see it down Town Street. I mean, this is important. The approach to Franklinton, East Franklinton, is on Town Street, past Land Grant, and heading towards this one intersection. If that sign's pointing the wrong way. Now, I don't want to suggest that and then have to come back here and it would beat you up over it.
We had a signage application earlier this year that came back for action with multiple options for placement. I mean, they squared away design, but when they came back for their final, so you could come back with it in different locations and that could be the ultimate, decision.
Scale it down, put it on that corner entrance right over the door.
Yeah, we've had a number of discussions, and I think it's sort of got indexed to that material change on this facade, and it's just a interesting location, but I'll certainly take that back. And we have, it's easy for us, why it's a rooster all the. So, if that's somewhere that Kathleen wants to go, but I appreciate the discussion and so open and engaging. It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely interesting, but I couldn't agree with you more about the signage standards. I mean,
Board.
you can drive down some streets and it's just like they kill the bite out of the corner.
Yeah.
Corner entrance right over the door, you know where you're going.
So just
late signs.
to summarize,
Late signs. Down. Something.
so just to summarize this conversation for them, it sounds like there is, potential support for the bare bulb roof sign at this specific location. Sounds like the mural is supportable. When you come back, we would need, more detail on that size, et cetera. But I wasn't hearing support for the third signage element, which would be the parking sign. Is that correct?
For my part, I don't care about the parking sign. I'm just curious what it wants.
Again, it's another, there's a limit for 2 signs, so it'll be going against the guidelines again.
Yes.
But,
And that's one, there's no good reason to do that, really.
Well, we wouldn't bring one if it wasn't meaningful. So if it's not there, it's not there. And unless she finds something cool and she has to have it, we'll bring it.
I mean, I think that signage rule is supposed to prevent 3 of the brand name signs going on the same building, but this isn't really a brand name sign, it's a parking sign, so that's why I'm okay with it. It's a functional
They
sign.
put up without talking to us anyway in the past, because it's responsible
Right.
partner who's not gonna do that. So,
Thank you.
All right, I think we sorted this one out. Thank you. All right. Last conceptual application is EF 22-11-004. Address is 610 West Town Street. Brad Parrish is the applicant and Kirk Marker is the owner. Staff report, please.
EF 22-11-004 for 610 West Town Street. The applicant is requesting conceptual review for a new mixed-use project located within the Dog Park subdistrict. The proposal includes a new 5-story mixed-use building, 4 stories of multifamily residential, essentially 60 to 70 units. That final number is still TBD. Ground floor leasing amenity and retail space, corner park and patio space, partial demolition and adaptive reuse of the existing building on site. The reuse being for parking structure for partially covered surface parking, and then outdoor amenity space on the rooftop of the existing building. Surface parking lot access from West Chapel Street, 3 detached townhome units along West Chapel Street. No modifications to development standards have been identified at this time. The submittal includes existing condition photos, conceptual site plan, floor plans, elevations, and perspectives. The proposed residential uses are consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The applicant has not identified an exact use for the proposed retail space. The board should discuss potential retail commercial type uses with the applicant. While staff supports the concept of a mixed-use building, it notes that Dodge Park Subdistrict is the most restrictive in East Franklinton regarding non-residential uses per City Code 3323.19. The board is unable to permit a commercial use. The plan recommends a height limit of 3 stories or 35 feet and a density of 6 to 10 dwelling units an acre in the Dodge Park Subdistrict. The proposal is inconsistent with these recommendations. However, staff is supportive of the additional height and density at this location due to proximity to State Route 315, location on the primary corridor, as well as elements of the design that satisfy other plan development standards, including the preservation and adaptive reuse of the historic building, the upper story setback from West Town Street frontage, and compatibility with the recently approved project at 640 West Town, as well as the townhome units that will fit in with the single-family home on the block and help fill in the Chapel streetscape. The East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan also states that development proposed at higher densities than recommended should utilize an extraordinarily high level of design and materials to provide compatibility with nearby architecture and employ solutions to mitigate impacts. Further, the plan notes that a wide range of architectural styles are appropriate for East Franklinton, with a preference for contemporary building design and materials. The plan also recommends that buildings have a consistent level of detailing on all 4 sides, contribute to street activity through transparency, create eyes on the street and pedestrian connectivity, as well as have parking located to the side or rear of buildings. Preservation of existing buildings is encouraged to the extent possible. Finally, the plan recommends the inclusion of street trees on all public streets. As such, staff recommends the following design modifications: exploring design solutions to create a more dynamic massing, i.e. vertical elements, variation in the materials, including transparency on the ground floor, additional balconies, changes in the parapet height, etc. Design the townhome garages to be accessed from the surface parking lot, removing the individual curb cuts from each unit and providing a direct connection from the unit to the public sidewalk. Employ best practices in preservation for the portions of the existing building being kept, including leaving the brick unpainted, maintaining original openings and character-defining features. And then work with the city forester to include street trees as appropriate across the site. Staff is supportive of the proposed uses and overall concept, but notes that additional information will need to be provided on the site plan, materials, landscaping, lighting, demolition, and any development standard modifications when the applicant returns for action. As this is conceptual review, there's no staff recommendation, but I do have some additional information that I wanted to pass out. The applicant sent this in late this morning. It's a report from a structural engineer about the condition of the existing building. I'll give you a minute to look over this. Sorry, I was out this morning, so I didn't decide to get it all to you. But give you a second to read it, and then I can provide some additional context. And you can call the next question, and then we can turn it over to our applicant.
So while we're reading this, one brief question, Stephanie, as to the commercial uses of the commercial portion of the building, I gather that the code is fairly specific about what can and can't be put there, mainly can't.
Yeah.
And that if the applicant comes in with an applicant, come in or not, however they're going to use it, they just need to be aware of that code section because.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you all can't grant prohibited uses.
Because that's not in our power. In fact, we don't really talk much about use that
Yeah.
much.
Right,
Yeah.
so there's a table in the code we can pull up if we want to, have a discussion. Glass access is in the building currently. And I looked back, there wasn't a COA for like their use in the building, but in looking through the code, like I said, Dodge Park's pretty restrictive. I think it's like artists, manufacturing and sales or something might be a good fit, but if you just look down the table in the code, there's a lot of prohibited retail commercial things in Dodge Park, so just something to consider and discuss. I'm ready for me to give my spiel on this report.
The short version is their opinion is the building's not salvageable. Of course. Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, we're not determining the ability to restore that building. It's up to the applicant to give
So,
it a role.
in regards to the existing building and this application in general, so they actually originally submitted for the October meeting. We met with them a few times and recommended, that they consider coming this month and take some time to look at the plan guidelines and try to do some things to bring it more in line, just because, this does dramatically exceed the density and the height limit for this neighborhood. So the thought was, if there are other boxes you can check, then that kind of starts to outweigh, exceeding the density and height. So they did that. We met with them a few times. And then on October 12th, I actually went out to the building with our historic preservation officers. And we just kind of looked around the outside just to see, some of the character defining features and look at the condition of the building and things like that. In talking with them about the building, they feel that this may not be an accurate representation of the condition. As far as just, I'm not sure what type of testing went into this at all. Like I said, we just went out and looked at it, but it just appeared that the building was in the condition that you would kind of expect, and that everything seemed kind of typical and repairable. So, based on our site visit, we wouldn't be in support of demolition, at least without additional information. So it would be our request to the applicant that they provide a more detailed structural report, kind of saying, what would need to happen to keep the portions of the building they were planning on keeping. And then that would be for you all to review and then make a decision if you supported or didn't support the demolition of this building. One thing that we talked about is that really the facade of this building is kind of just generally being preserved from an aesthetic rather than a structural in the proposal as we have it today. So the concerns about the structural, just providing additional information on that and how, the facade would be able to be kept. If it's just going to be kept aesthetically, would be our recommendation that we need more information before we could support the demolition, which is just kind of counter to the staff report you have and the proposal you have in front of you, because it's showing keeping that building. And this is all information that they got today that they provided. And we wanted to have it as a part of the conceptual discussion, but just with this extra note that as staff, we need more information on this before.
So applicant, what is your preference?
We like the programming that is currently shown. It's really about the constructability and preservation of that. So whether it's utilizing those bricks that can be saved in another manner or replicating that with new construction, it's the constructability while preserving that existing facade. But we want to remain the character and the concept that we've shown.
By no means, with this new report, the information came today. It's not that we're going to come back with a new proposal that's bigger, better, and all that. It's somehow, giving that same character to that one-story building in this design. I mean, we, from a massing of the overall concept we've shifted the building, from Town Street to miss that chimney, to be part of this sort of play between the existing. So we still want to hold that tight, even in light of this new information today. So I think that's the direction that we want to make sure that that's the ground, setting the table for the discussion today. And that's why I wanted to bring forth today, so that we could have a meaningful dialogue.
So I've been in the building many times, with different capacities, including with Columbus Landmarks. And the building is the old trolley turnaround station. It has massive, on the east wall, has massive doors to bring the trolley cars in where they can work on them in the actual storage space inside. Now, you can't see it in any of the photos, you can't see it in this report, certainly. But that's what we're missing. That's from what I can tell. I'm not an architect or even really a historic preservationist exactly. But that's the character of the place that has value. But not on everybody's right.
A question for the applicant, what led to you obtaining the structural engineer report?
Yeah, we went out there just to figure out how to tie it in, knowing that we were coming here. We had Rob Cernak, Rob Johnson come out there, just to look at it with our construction company as well, just to see how we would tie in and go about constructing this overall proposal. Again, the full intent is to maintain this kind of feature. But he said this is a typical problem that you see in Ohio with southern exposure in the freeze thaw. It's a 3-course brick type of construction. The building was built in 1928, so there's no insulation. It's just 3 courses of brick deep throughout the building. Again, the southern face is really the prominent side where the exposure is. Unfortunately, that's also the Town Street face. The eastern side of the building is in good shape. Our proposal does provide staging the east side as well as the west side. Is just really the concern is along the chimney line that you can see on there. And then that southern face, what our building programming is this is purely parking. So it's not necessarily acting as any really support structure. It's just kind of how do you preserve that during building with it being in the shape that it's in and making sure that it maintains its structure going forward for 20, 30 years. So that the overall report just said it's probably not the most efficient way to go about it, which again, that passes down onto the overall product and rents that you're going to have to offer to that end user. So really just trying to bring about an affordable product in an efficient manner that is cost friendly for all parties involved.
I mean, when you mentioned structure, it's structure of the wall itself, not anything that we're proposing above and beyond. It's just how is that 3-course wide brick really going to stand up during construction as well as, past that time.
You can see it's had modifications over time if you walk through that building face again, but a lot of even the cast stone bottom is all peeling off or has been kind of re-adhered over time, but looks relatively shoddy work. Some of the photos in there as well show bowing. I personally hadn't gone out there until I met Rob Johnson out there to go look at it. I thought the building was pretty sound until we kind of you can see all the cracks and kind of just decay. It's only, again, predominantly on that southern exposure. And I learned that's just a typical Ohio problem that we get or freeze thaw.
Right, well, we got a lot of issues here. Right.
Yeah.
They want to make a presentation, they have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, besides the discussion about the existing building, I think, some of the things that I want to understand is from a density on this site, the height, trying to pair up against the project adjacent 640, does this fit for this site? Our response back to Chapel and adding these townhomes, to sort of infill that. I want to get feedback on that. We deliberately did a white box because there's a lot just with the massing and making sure that the site circulates before we proceeded to what the thing will really look like. And so I think these are all sort of concepts that I want to talk about today. We feel that it's very important, again, to sort of shift that off of town to give some visual presence actually to the 640, but also create a sort of dynamic corner here for whether it be a tenant that takes that or it's an amenity to the building and the tenants for the apartment building. So I think those are all kind of talking points that I wanted to make sure that I got your feedback on today, since we are at a conceptual level.
Can I start with the obvious dumb question? Are you able to park the site?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the parking is 1-to-1. Currently, again, that's part of how it's all underground, being screened by that. Yeah, at grade, but all screened by the existing building frontage.
So there are 80 spaces there?
There's like 69
spots, and the 69 includes the 3 for the townhomes as well. And which, based on staff, they would want, access to those townhomes off the parking lot and not off of Chapel.
Okay.
Yeah, our goal would be to park it 1-to-1. It's currently parked 1-to-1, and we've had preliminary conversations with the city parking as well. They're open to looking if we needed to exceed it, but at this time, we're 1-to-1.
To refresh me, 1-to-1 is,
1-to-1 better.
no, yeah, but it means that
One
is
parking.
after for,
Yeah, that's the code.
is that after the 50% reduction in East Franklinton intensified? It's just standard now, 1-to-1.
That's just standard. It's the one as of like 2019, maybe they passed some new parking.
Thanks.
You don't have to deal with parking anymore.
Yeah,
So fill that bucket up. Cap and trade bucket. It's not this stuff.
So have you looked, did you look at actually, instead of just doing a bar building, of actually bending it towards Chapel and maybe instead of being the height throughout, lower it and creating a bigger footprint?
We did, but that again starts to add some cost and structure as you're supporting more covered parking really over the entire space. And really, again, it's a price conscious product that we're trying to bring to the marketplace.
So are we deliberating?
Well, we're
I think
we're at least providing them insight into what we're likely to do.
something else I'd just like to explore, and I heard the note as well, bringing the parking and the garage access off of those single families off town on Chapel into the parking lot itself. The ideal situation would be to have the parking driveways off of Chapel. Again, just for the fact that these could be then later dispositioned as true single family homes down the road, not having to provide another easement or a secured garage kind of liability at that point.
So you've heard our discussions in the past about front facing garages.
I don't.
We have, it's been, the board has talked about that a lot.
Okay.
Proposals have come, and we don't believe that that's kind of appropriate to
Okay.
this area. So my opinion would be that the front facing garages is not appropriate. I love the units on Chapel. I mean, if you look at the East Franklinton plan, it's exactly what they had envisioned for this lot, which was single family houses along Chapel and then keeping the commercial buildings on the front. So I don't know if you really studied that plan, but they do say in that plan though, that the commercial buildings should be mixed use. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of good qualities to what you're doing here. I love the setback, the capture of the green space on Town Street. You know, saving the building, yes or no? I don't quite know how that all fits in yet. I can see what you're trying to do. I think, you know, the building addressing Town Street is the right thing, whether it's a new or it's using the existing building. One of the things that I'm really struggling with is just putting parking on Town Street. And obviously it's like just putting a parking garage on Town Street. It would be great if you had some program along the entire edge of town. And I know you've got that one end. But it just seems all of a sudden you're creating this blank facade, and I know you're doing some things with art and stuff to animate it. And if you use the existing building, then you've got that whole historic character. But it's just, you know, to me, and I know that then you're getting into the parking issue, but you know, that's where the push and pull comes.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think that, you know, we've approved the building height next to you.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, and we proved that, and we gave them additional height because it was on 315. And I personally feel like 315 can take the height, but once you start moving into the neighborhood, it should step down. But you guys are stepping up. So to me, from an urban design standpoint, it would be far better if this building was like 1 story less. That's why I said if you wrapped it around and made a bigger footprint, you could lower the building and still keep the same number of units, but then you get into the parking issue probably.
Yeah.
So
Parking is the driver here.
yeah. And again, we're 1-to-1, but you don't need to provide 1-to-1. That's what Jim was asking, right? Because of the reduction.
Otherwise, we'd have to be $15,000 per stall. That's not present. It's a penalty, not.
Okay.
Yeah, not a it's
Well,
But there is the 50% reduction in East Franklinton, right?
That's what takes it to 1-to-1.
That's what got us there. Okay, I got the.
that's what I was, yeah, I didn't, yeah. Anyway, those are the things that I'm struggling with. I think, you know, it looks like it could be a really great project, and I think there's a lot of really great moves in terms of the whole site. I just don't like the parking, and I know that you're trying to solve a parking problem, but occupying that Town Street edge to me and kind of creating just a dead edge with it.
So it would, to answer that, the facade along the existing building would be very similar. I mean, it's the existing building now, so we'd maintain that door opening, which is currently the glass access shop.
Right.
That would have an access point into the garage for it, but in terms of what you're seeing now and what you're seeing in this presentation, it's identical. You can't see into.
Right, but I would like to see it be an active edge, so
Got
that
it.
there's something happening there that's animates the street.
Yeah.
So that's my comments.
Yeah, I think that back to the height where, the first floor is we're trying to get 9 foot for the units, and then it's the 16 foot to get to above the existing roof line of the existing building. That's kind of setting why that is getting a little bit higher in height. So, I mean, if we didn't have that, we could drop it and be more in line with what was it, 50 or 58?
Yeah, whatever that is, that's in here.
Is 58 approved at the 640 West Broad.
And again, it's just, I'm just giving you a reaction.
Yeah.
That I would have anticipated from our review of something stepping into the neighborhood, so.
Yeah.
Just as the project, as you develop the project, something to think about.
Okay.
I agree with everything you just said.
That's too easy.
I don't think that out of my own.
Other comments?
Just to make sure I understand, because it was a lot. So, because I think the height is kind of what, I think it's coming in, I'm starting to learn how we look at Broad Street and why we approve certain height levels on that. I wasn't necessarily here on the one that's coming up on 315, but we approved the height on that. So in knowing that this is gonna come more, you guys are now coming in, again, not consistent with the plan, kind of how we look at the height in the neighborhood, I think is something that like we said, once we start approving something here, does that become the piece of the, or like you were mentioning, that we're looking for goes height, and then as you go into the neighborhood, it starts going down into our Catalinas or something. How, maybe if you guys can even help me understand that, or did you already mention that, and I just
So this part of the neighborhood is only supposed to be 3 stories, and it's
Right.
because it historically, it was the more residential, single-family part, and when the plan was done 10 years ago, whatever, it was deemed like, we want to maintain that character.
Right.
And so that's a consideration that, and we're asking, for a couple more stories than what the plan proposes. But if you look at 315 as a corridor, and, there's improvements being made as we speak to that, what that's all going to look like. And Town and Rich are there's a in and out of Columbus and gateway streets in and out. I personally think that the plan was probably a little bit too conservative, that because of that, the 315 edge and being, very traffic oriented, and it's very wide, and of course now you've got all this stuff going across the street with the Mount Carmel site, that I think this edge of East Franklinton can take more density. And I think the corridor, the Town and Rich corridor is also, again, I think it can take more density, but it needs to step back into the neighborhood and back to some of the scale, because it goes back up at the railroad, right? With River and Rich and Gravity, it's going back up again. And I think that's appropriate too, because of the railroad. But I think the plan envisioned that there's a center part to the neighborhood that is kind of neighborhood, and, what's the street that your house is on, Chip? What's the street that your house is on?
Walnut Street.
Yeah, Walnut Street. I mean, that's meant to be, I think that was intended to be kind of like that, right? And it kind of creates that more human scale, but the edges, I think, as Columbus continues to develop, density is going to continue to be an issue. We need to think about more density to handle everything that's happening.
One thing out there, and I'm not arguing this, saying this changes anybody's mind one way or the other, but it is the fact that directly across the street from this site is the Pilot Dogs, which is like a 1-story brick box And they just added a couple more buildings like within the last 5 years. So they're not going anywhere. They own all that. Again, I don't know what that means necessarily. It's this and this, but at the same time, this is kind of dead. You know, like nothing against pilot dogs. I love them. I do. But it's not super active on, they're not activating their sidewalk, except it's all, which is awesome.
Pilot dogs came before us a couple of years ago, and opposing pilot dogs is about like opposing mom apple pie.
Yeah, we would love to push for the height. Again, hear your concerns and understand the logic there. But this site is one block literally from the entryway to 315, so it does have some visibility and could provide another nice buffer as you do transition down lower. Understandingly could be the last of the height, but that is why we're pushing.
Can I ask, have you guys talked to the Columbus Landmarks Foundation or Franklinton Historical Society?
Yeah.
Well, they'll probably call you.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, again, our concept here is to preserve that building. This report came to us this morning. And again, whether or not it was all based off of trying to figure out the most economical way of preserving that building and constructing what we're proposing, should it be approved? And if there is a workaround not preserving that, again, we would want to basically replace this with the exact same scheme as shown, but not have to go through with trying to maintain a nearly 100-year-old building. That's not necessarily some people, but again.
You could use similar materials.
Yeah,
Similar,
exactly.
yeah, to
We're just
newer
replacing
construction
it.
and use similar materials to give the look and feel of what that is at this point.
That's one more question. Yep. And that has to do with Grub Street being one way to the south. It's always been a problem. We've got class access was there. Trying to get people from the off ramp, which is on Rich Street, all the way to their front door. People would have to do this. Is that something?
Conversation, the feedback was they were more in favor of us having our access to the parking lot come off of Chapel. We initially had the building.
Off of Grub.
Yeah.
It was parallel to town, our initial concept. And we had between the residential and sort of a curb cut there so that you would come down Grub and turn into the parking lot. And it was discussed with traffic and staff that coming off of Chapel was the better approach.
Kim, do all houses have garages? Do all the houses have garages? And if so, do driveways with no garages?
Oh, do they have to have a garage?
Well, you don't like front facing garages, I'm just
But
thinking.
we have a driveway.
I
You have a driveway with no garage?
And I don't think they need to have a garage.
Yeah.
But I'm not, I was not trying to express just my sentiment.
No, I
There's a
understand.
board too, right? There was I forget what there was a proposal that they wanted, it was a single family house. They wanted to put a garage or right on the street. And the board at that time felt that, you totally, it's more of a suburban than character that you're getting in an urban neighborhood. So we were much more in favor of rear garages or no garages, I guess. That's a parking thing.
Yeah, no, fair.
I guess I'll just add that I would hate to see the original building go away. I'm glad to hear that that's your intent is to
Yep.
keep it. And, despite the structural report, if it's just going to be a facade, hopefully you can find a way to preserve that since you're not really relying on it structurally.
Correct.
Agree with that too.
Is there anything else you need guidance on?
I don't think so. I think that the height is probably the difficult challenge here in knowing, where we've come to date so far. And if we need to step into the neighborhood, and still keep, the number of units to make the project viable, I think that's, besides the structural issues, that's also a hard task.
And again, we're looking at a white box.
White box.
Yeah.
If I could step the roof line to reduce it down, yeah. So I think again, the white box doesn't do justice to your argument or your comment here, so.
And I like the
It's a
general
baby
message,
step.
but there's so much more you can do to that to help,
For sure.
mitigate height. If you
Yeah.
will. And,
No, right, naturally.
and I'm just trying to recognize that this part of the neighborhood is supposed to be 3 stories by, and so how far do we allow that to be pushed? I personally felt comfortable up against 315. Okay, now we're a block back and we're not only pushing it, but we're pushing it higher, and that's where the rub.
So you would at least consider approving a design that mitigated, that is that height, but mitigates the appearance of that height. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I want to see the design of the building before I pass judgment.
No, but again.
But if we explore it, that's something.
Okay, all right.
I mean, just,
I'm not asking to approve the white box.
we're
So,
five.
if you're talking about 5 stories, it's supposed to be 3, but we're saying we would approve 5. Is that?
If it were broken up more,
not saying
depending on.
Saying anything.
We reserve, I think what I'm saying is he reserves judgment.
Well, it's just, I mean, again, it's the whole board. It's just.
No, it's just, we're saying we will if, save the historic building, and then we'll talk about the 5-story, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
well,
feel like that sort of mitigates the whole impact for me when I can see a historic structure saved, then I can more easily justify, well, you know, they put this extra effort into saving the history of this. And I like the design too, and I understand that you can really easily just demolish that and use similar materials and get a very similar look, but we're kind of losing the soul of the neighborhood piece by piece by doing that. So I really hesitate on the height situation always, but I feel like I can feel a little better about that if we're preserving some history on that site.
That's why I was saying if it was not a bar, but it was an L and you step it down a whole floor but you're just spreading it out. But you said you looked at that and it didn't work. I don't.
Right, you're just adding more overall coverage.
But if you're still building it over parking.
It's the steel supports and structure for foundations.
More foundations and stuff, you're building that already, so going vertical is more cost per him.
I hear those arguments all the room.
That's right.
Additional.
Everything will be spread, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll go back. I think those are the two.
Board, do I get the impression that we may approve a 5-story building here subject to seeing the exact design of that building? Is that what I'm hearing? I want to give them kind of a unified
The building,
thought.
the building next to them that we approved is the same height, right? Or just.
Barely, yeah.
I mean, we had a really long discussion about setting a thing about Catalina sitting on top of building, because that's like, for me, I think it's very important of, okay, so we know the next thing that, like, where are we going to stop? Why are we going to approve this one? So when the next one comes, like, why are we approving 5 stories on this one? Just for me to understand, just knowing it isn't consistent. And if we say, you know what, the whole neighborhood should be 5, that could be a discussion for us. We can do that. I'm just interested to know when we
Start stepping it down.
we're saying, like, we think it should do this, but like what? It would be putting in those little parameters of like, when it's this or that, I think is helpful for me.
Right, and it could be 5 and 4, right? The building itself could step a story, and then the next site might be 3, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying, like, that would help me understand like why or where or when, so when these do come, we know if we're consistent in who we're talking, like, why we're approving everything.
And is this project viable at 4 stories and just taking away those extra units?
It's a lot of units.
Yeah.
For instance, Joe, you said also, the investment to restore that building, however they have to do it, is an investment, right? And so, you're doing something for the neighborhood, which is positive. So how do we, do you get a little bit more density to help offset that investment? So.
Yeah, again, the end goal here is trying to bring about a project that's financially viable, that has an affordable rent profile for the future residents to maintain occupancy in this neighborhood.
I guess my point to that, again, it's interesting because it is what the guidelines say. So when it is a gamble of like, is it going to get approved? Because everything does say it's supposed to be 3 stories. So that's something that I know this is gonna keep coming because we're approving past our 3.
Yeah.
But again, everything is said when the lot was bought, it was a 3-story. That's what's in the plan.
So back to precedent, we set precedent with approving building next door at 5 stories, so.
Yeah.
Well, and again, when we did that with both Gravity and the building next door, we were quite specific in our discussion about the precedent we're setting, which was that there, in one case, you're next to the freeway, in the other case, you're on Broad Street at the far end towards downtown by the railroad tracks. Well,
Yeah, not only is the neighboring building next to 315, but it's also, the site's half the length.
Yeah.
This building's twice as long, and I think that needs to be considered as
That's
well.
why,
I think I could be comfortable with 4 stories if it's stepped back on the corners, maybe 5, depending on the exact height and the design of the building. But I'd have a hard time going over 4, just because of how long this building is compared to the neighboring one.
So to add some more detail to this conversation, when we initially looked or had conversations with Stephanie and her team at the city, they were open to even expanding and going taller and more dense with a parking structure type of product. But again, that rent profile and feasibility for a project doesn't necessarily fit. So this is a lower project than what the initial conversation was willing to explore, and even more mindful of the resident that currently lives on Chapel, providing a buffer on Chapel.
So are you saying rent profile, are you saying this conversation affects what the rents are going to be?
For sure, constructability of a project definitely trickles down to the final user, right? A structured parking garage is going to be significantly more expensive to build, which then gets passed on to the rents and what rent is going to be charged per parking
I mean, it's
space.
also a factor of what you pay for the land, there's a million factors. But to your point, Lauren, I mean, at some point, we need to create a standard and stand by it, because, I mean, yeah, we would love to have a great building and everybody makes a lot of money and the rents are low and everybody's happy. But we haven't seen the pro forma. I don't know what you paid for the land. I don't need to know. I shouldn't know. But at the end of the day, we would love the rents to be low.
But if I built a $500,000 house, I wouldn't sell the house for $1,000 or $100,000, right? Like you're building a product to make sure you're building it to the end users and needs, right?
I get that. I'm saying you can't bear on our discussion necessarily, because we don't know what the numbers really look like.
But I think back to her point is where does the tipping point where residential is it 2 streets over? Is it this street? Is it like when are we allowed to really go and break code and ask for, a bigger, denser project here? Is Grub the defining line because it's the border to 315, or is it Gift? Or is it the next one? Or, and I think that's where it's hard, even as a designer, we are taking a gamble every time we bring something in, because it's kind of the will of the board of where is that tipping point?
so Gift is the division between the 2 neighborhoods in the plan, right?
Yeah.
So, and each one is defined with a different character. So if everybody was back and reads the plan and what the intent was, there's all sorts of language in there about what was trying to be achieved. To me, when Bill and I had the pleasure of actually meeting with Mayor Coleman when we were appointed to the board, and he wanted this place to be cool and eclectic and different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're talking about is we don't want homogeneity. We want different things happening, and plans to give us guidance to that. But the board's, I think our goal is to come up with the best developments that we can for this East Franklinton, so that it creates that vibe that Mayor Coleman had envisioned for this area. So.
And just to add, since you mentioned the conversations we had earlier on, I would say that is accurate, that we did tell them that staff would be supportive of the additional density. That's what we said in the staff for the additional height. And then we listed those mitigating factors that Ms. Hamilton was talking about. And as you mentioned, perhaps, in hindsight, the plan was a little bit conservative because of, the intersection of the primary corridors here. So from a staff perspective, totally valid point about, well, when do we start stepping down? And but I think that gets to the idea of precedent and each of these being individual circumstances. And if something, a modification was granted here, stating why those reasons were. But from a staff perspective, our reasons for being okay with that additional height density are the mitigating factors, the preservation, the units on Chapel, and whatnot, so.
No, I mean, in theory, and again, I'm not taking, so just so everybody's clear, I'm not taking a position on this. This is, I'm Switzerland here as much as possible. I try to develop a consensus on the board. That's my role in the world. But in terms of a legally viable precedent, we could have a legally viable precedent that says that, you know, that the applicant's in here to preserve a historic building, that we're going to give some leeway on height. That's a valid precedent.
We're gonna add a Catalina sign on top of it. Thanks for listening.
Any other comments?
The chimney.
Yeah,
Sure.
so that was the driving force
Yeah.
for it. Really, this
Yeah,
makes
to
it-
Let's see how you integrate that, because right now it shows off as you got a white building, but
Yeah.
are you really gonna integrate that chimney?
That was the idea.
I think that's
See if
something,
it-
I think that could be
execution.
extremely cool.
it's gonna hold our sound.
Hey, Jim, where did you say the trolley doors were?
East
Yeah.
side, east face of the building. Obviously, they cannot be.
It can't be accessed because it's right on the property.
It's on the
line.
property.
Because idea, you know, the minute he said it, it'd be awesome if that's.
This little arc, yeah, you can't, oh, maybe you can,
I've got a picture of them I can send out.
yeah, they're beautiful. They're huge, they're like, what, 20, 15
Yeah.
feet high, big enough to bring a trolley. Before this building was here, there was a turn around. I don't know, there's some story, but that's what the building was for.
So again, that is part of the structure though.
That wall would be preserved.
Yeah,
And then just as another.
Oh, that gets preserved.
yeah,
Yes.
the whole building.
Yes, we're trying to keep that whole wrap around it.
You can do
That, again, that structural report is purely regarding the southern face, is the eastern face where that trolley bar door is in great shape. It's the southern face from the sun coming in the winter months, and 3 courses of brick with no expansion joints, just,
Thank you.
Cool, you might add it to your presentation.
Yeah, and again, if there's some liberties there.
Yeah.
We're not gonna cut that through now like
That would be a nice thing.
And then just generally a reminder for applicants and the board, we can't be evaluating based on costs as a factor.
Yeah,
So just keeping that in mind.
Based on what?
Cost being a factor. We need to be looking at the plan and the guidelines, the code, and
That's outside of our area of authority for sure. I agree with that.
And you also said the use is outside of your authority, is that correct?
uh,
I have to look to Dodge, the.
Yeah, so the board can approve a change of use as long as that is listed as a permitted use in the
Okay.
code. So that there are a lot of, there's a use table, it's 332319, that lists all the neighborhoods and says whether it's a permitted, prohibited, or accessory use. And so essentially, you would need to look at the Dodge Park column and find some like non-residential use that would be permitted. Because otherwise, you would have to go through like the actual council re-submitting process, which just generally doesn't happen in East Franklinton because of the mixed-use nature of the zoning code as it is. So we would discourage that.
we prefer not to do it.
Yeah. There are a few, but the one I said, I think the artists,
Yeah.
manufacturing and sales spaces seem to be the most viable when I looked at it.
We provide you with sufficient guidance?
We believe so.
Okay,
Thank
good deal.
you.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. They're being.
Looks like October came.
It's in there. She had it after the,
Okay, guys, I think
Public
it's
forum.
out. Thank you, Stephanie.
Have a good one.
That was a challenge. Today, the whole meeting was something of a challenge for me.
Well, I find it interesting, we have relatively board